Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Clemson Police Advisory Board meeting, Thursday, January 22nd, 2021. First, we have a roll call. We'll start from our left to right.
Lisa Robinson.
Bill Key.
Mark Thompson.
Jeffrey Roberts.
Evan Dahl.
Eunice Laymacher.
Madam Chair, should let the record show that Sarah Williams emailed me and said she did not make the meeting due to report conflict. So she.
Thank you very much. We have approval of the agenda. Anybody like to make a motion?
First.
Second.
First, second, Kevin and Jeff here. Then we'll go on to the approval of previous meetings. Have a motion?
Move to accept the previous minutes meeting.
Thank you. Now we move forward to the citizen comments for topics not already on the agenda. Would you like to speak, sir? Yes, sir. No.
My name is Robert Lee. Is that okay up here? Okay. I live at 113 Preston Drive in Clemson. And I'm here, I have some concerns I'd like to be heard and considered, not necessarily answered at this time. Basically, I have 4 questions, and I'd rather have thought and consideration and answers now, but that's later. So this is about, and I think it's relevant here, the law enforcement aspects of the new ordinance, the hate intimidation ordinance that was passed on Monday, I believe. So I'm asking about the law enforcement aspects of that. I think are relevant. So my interpretation of reading the ordinance, and this is my interpretation of the first question, is a statement that I interpreted as, I'll say, in order to determine whether a person has violated the hate intimidation ordinance, an enforcement authority must analyze the content or the subject matter of the conduct or speech and the meaning or viewpoint of that content or subject matter to determine if it's one of the 13 listed biases that determine if the conduct runs afoul of the law, the ordinance. I know that's a long question. I've just had my written notes here, so I would supply it in written form if that helps. I just haven't done that at this time to determine that. Second question is there any person now in the police department with experience in that kind of enforcement? The third question, has there ever been or will there ever be training to prepare the police department, the law enforcement authorities for that special kind of enforcement? And the fourth question is the police department prepared at this time to effectively and lawfully enforce this ordinance? And I'll say it again, rather than have, I don't expect any, I'd rather have informed and thought and considered answers later than anything now, but anything now. So that concludes what I have to say. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Roberts, can you elaborate a little bit more what you mean by law enforcement aspects on your first question? I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
With the law enforcement duties, enforcement of the
I understand exactly what you're asking. I understand exactly what you're asking.
Would you explain?
Not to disrespect the chief or anything, but mine is it that you are wondering how law enforcement is going to determine that somebody has committed a hate crime. How do you get to that?
Yes, I apologize if I wasn't clear, but that's
okay.
Yeah, that is what I mean.
I wasn't clear on the first question either, because you said there were 13 points that they have to determine.
There are.
I didn't hear a question. For the first question, I didn't actually hear a question. I heard you make a statement and read the law that the officer has to determine whether 13 points were.
Well, one of the 13, the ordinance, this says, I don't have the ordinance in front of me. I think it says, if based on, or based
The
on,
protected classes,
it lists 13, a list of.
protected classes,
So the officer
which I
would-
think is, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think it's the same ones that are listed in the Constitution of what a protected class is. So race, gender, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, there is a list of 13 I counted in this one, but that is, that is right. But the officer would need to determine, basically, he'd have to, analyze the subject matter through several different layers of understanding. I think
My
is the law.
personal opinion is I think that you can have any kind of heated exchange with anyone, and people can determine what they want to determine with it, where what might be back and forth about may not have anything to do with any of those points, whether what color they are, sexual orientation, or anything like that. I think it's personally, I think it was it hasn't been studied enough for this city because what I missed when I saw the second reading and it passed the second reading is name me instances that brought us to this point. That's what I didn't like about it. I felt like it was done just a little bit too fast when it should have been looked at a little bit closer. Not saying it doesn't happen, but when you usually do a law like with putting stop signs up some places or do speed bumps somewhere, you have a pattern of behavior and you also have evidence that this has occurred. This is what I feel like the city of Clemson did not get.
All right, thank you.
Evidence of actual hate crime.
Yes, thank you for
If I
clarifying.
might
it.
add, if I might clarify, there really is not a lot of data with regard to hate crimes because there is no requirement in our state to have to maintain that data. And so if you do search to try to see, well, how many instances of this have we had, you're not really going to find that information because there is no requirement because our state does not have a hate crimes law on the books for those protected classes. And so that's why you might not find those
And it's
listed
probably why it hasn't
instances.
passed on the state level either.
That might be, but there are, certainly there are instances of bias, discrimination, and things that take place. There are also a number, I think 20 active hate crime organizations in our state, 5 of which are in the upstate. So it's just a protective measure.
Thank you. I understand that, but my intention was to limit it to you, to particular the people who are on the street actually having to do the work.
Correct.
Because that's what this board concerns. So that's really not, I have my reasons too. I don't want to mention them either. I'm particularly concerned about what's relevant here is that the law enforcement officer on the street, how is he going to know? Is he trained to do this?
That's
Is that,
right.
So I think, anyway, that's,
Thank
as long
you.
as, I think that's what I want understood, that my focus in here is the law enforcement officer on the street. What does he know what to do?
So I guess I just want to understand, you had a particular situation that brought this all to mind, or was it the reading?
No, I read the ordinance. I live here in the city, and so to me, this is relevant to me. I'm affected by this in many ways, and possibly unforeseen, unexpected, undesired ways. So I'm just a private citizen. I'm a law and order person. I've benefited from the law and order here, and I've utilized the police
Because
department.
anybody can have a heated exchange with anybody and say things that you wouldn't normally say, and I guess it depends on how they interpret them. It's the way I look at it. And you wouldn't have, you may not have that in the content of your heart that you're racist or you're something else, because people do have, and they have confrontations with the police.
So I would say that, in my views too, the police officer would, unless have careful training, would be confused about what to do. So I think that's,
it would be a hard thing to prove.
so I mean, I think
frankly.
to effectively enforce the law, they need something more.
I think it should have been studied a little bit more, but that's just my opinion before they move so fast on it.
But we're also assuming that they haven't got trained. So that would be,
I don't know.
That would be a question for the
Yes,
chief,
I mean, I
because
asked.
for all we know, they've been thoroughly
That
trained.
was one of my questions.
And we don't have answers to that question. I don't think anybody here has
I
answers to
will
that question.
prepare a response and report back to the board.
Yeah, I would rather, I think, Thank you very much.
Thank you for the
Is it-
questions.
One thing I'll just say, and it'll be part of my response, is training in all kinds of areas of the law is something that's always needed by our officers to enable to effectively enforce the laws. And this being a relatively new law for us to deal with, training is definitely something we need to seek.
Well, you just hope that you don't live in a community, and I guess that's what my point is, that we don't live in a community like Clemson that has that kind of feeling towards each other, because I certainly don't wake up every day thinking that way. Some people might, but I don't. So I've never had that sense of it being here in this community, and I could be wrong.
Well, people that live here, I agree from that standpoint. However, we are a community where people visit us, so we attract people from outside of our community that may have those tendencies, behaviors.
Well, it would be from people from the outside doing it to the outside, but not to the inside. To
Well,
the
as long as
outside.
they're not doing it to
That's
our,
what I'm
as long as they're not doing it to our citizens and guests, we need to be prepared to deal with it. So,
I will, if there's an email address, I'll type this up so I
Thank
can
you.
declare it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
we're on citizen
Anybody else?
comment.
Did you have anything, ma'am? Or you just here
Okay.
observing? Okay. Is anybody else on any call-ins? No. Okay. Thank you. All right, Chief. Department status.
Okay, real quickly, we had one resignation this past month. Officer Duncan, who is one of our canine officers, resigned. He, for family reasons, so
He's a good officer.
yeah, for family reasons, there was no other reason why he had, it was a family decision. We still have one vacancy. We have the 3 that are in the academy. The one gentleman that came back, we had to work on some additional training with him, and he starts the academy back on next Monday. And he only has a couple of weeks left, and then hopefully he'll be out. The 3 officers that were in their field training have all finished their field training, so they're all solo, I think, except for one. I think he's in his last week this week, and he'll be cut solo. And all 3 of them were sworn in before council this week on Monday. And one of those 3 is our new SRO for the elementary school. So he's finishing up on the road, but about to start his orientation over at the elementary school. Being a new budget year, we have a lot of purchases that are going through, one of which is the taser. We're waiting on them to be assembled and sent to us. I have staff registered to go to the instructor training, and we're also going to be borrowing some of the instructors from the University Police Department to help train our staff. So when the tasers get here, they'll be able to issue them out and move forward. We're also having to change our policy to add the taser to our policy, our use of force policy, and place that on the use of force continuum where it's most appropriate. And where it's going to sit is what we call active aggression. So if someone's actively, physically fighting, that's where the taser is expected to be used, at that level or above. So we will train everybody, brief them on the new policy, and move forward. As we all know, our students will be returning next month. I know move-in starts August 10th, and the first day of class is August 18th. The welcome back event that they have on College Avenue will be on the 16th, which is a Monday. We'll be partnering with the University Police Department to have that event going on. A number of other things in our budget. I know one thing that's been a topic of discussion over in Seneca was the use of the automatic license plate readers. If you haven't seen the news articles, the university uses them. They have them stationary around campus. I got funding this year to purchase 2. that we are going to place on one of our speed trailers. And because we don't have the funding to put them at key locations around the city, we're going to put it on a speed trailer and move the trailer around. So when we have a crime spree in a particular area, we will set it up to try to develop leads for what may be going on in that particular area. We're still in the process of purchasing them and installing them and have that out, but we'll have that capability. That data will get uploaded to the same system that the university uses. We'll share that information back and forth. Hopefully be a force multiplier to help us solve some of the crimes that are going on in the city. And that's my department status, if anybody has any questions.
Chief, does the university have any of that? Do they have any licensed readers?
Yes, they're all over campus.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yep.
You plan on
They-
putting
they
them
have
on
not only
patrol
go-
cars?
Say again?
Are you going to put them on patrol cars or just stationary?
No, I'm going to put our speed trailer, one of our
Yeah.
speed trailers, it'll go on the trailer.
You have two coming?
2 cameras, so what that will
Oh.
do is only, if I remember correctly, 1 camera can only handle 2 lanes of travel. So if you put 2 cameras on there, you can handle 4 lanes of travel.
Tell you what, it keeps you from going over the speed limit in Pendleton.
Well, it's
That
not,
thing is
that's not what
bright.
that's not what those cameras are for.
Yeah, no, the ALPR cameras, the automatic license plate reader cameras.
Okay, I
So-
guess I'm,
They
Yeah.
pick up stolen
But-
cars
Pick
and stuff like
stolen
that.
cars.
If a crime happens, they say this vehicle's in this area. They go to those license plate readers and they find different vehicles in that area at the time.
Yeah, we have used the university system to investigate a lot of crimes, and we've solved a lot of them using that data because they do have them on the periphery of campus. So the ingress roads coming into campus is where they're at, and most of us,
Now,
perimeter road to 76, and you go by those points, so it captures that information.
have there been any court cases where, let's say, it was in a stolen car and that license plate reader came back to the owner, but the owner wasn't the criminal?
So I'm not aware of a case that if a car is reported stolen, if the agency that entered that vehicle in as stolen doesn't remove it from the system in the timely manner that it should, and someone gets stopped and they're the actual owner of that car and they're in their own car, I would hope the agency would handle that stop appropriately and eventually figure out that that's the owner. There have been situations like that, but under our NCIC rules, when a car has been recovered, there's a process that makes that agency take that vehicle out within a certain time period, and if it doesn't, then that agency gets sanctioned for not doing it. So we have a time limit. So if we enter a car and it's stolen, we have to, and another agency recovers it, we have, and it's minutes from the time that they tell us that they've recovered it, to have to take it out. And if we don't, then we're liable. So would the automatic license plate reader pick that up if it wasn't removed from the system? Yes. No different than if an officer got behind the car and ran the tag and it still came back as stolen and initiated a stop because of it. Same scenario. So
Alrighty.
Chief, is there any alert system if a stolen vehicle drives by one of your LPRs? Does it have any alert
it
system?
has the capability of alerting the officers when they're logged into the system, as well as our dispatchers.
So
we
officers can log into their onboard computers and get alerts if.
Yep, they can log into the website and get those alerts, and the dispatchers can get those alerts as well. The tricky part of it is, that alert will come in, but if we're not in that area, by the time the car travels, we can look in the area to see if it's still there, but 9 times out of 10, it's on down the road.
Y'all have like a shift change where shift changes, you report like this is what went on first shift and second shift and pass it on to the,
Yes, we actually do a pass-on sheet where the supervisor from the previous shift is responsible for putting everything that happened that day on their shift on that, and they use that to pass on to the next officer. And if they don't pick up on it, they can always go back to what we call the share drive and pull it up and read it if they didn't see it. So we do those pass-ons.
any other questions? Alrighty, go to the crime review.
on to the crime review for June. So up on the screen. So for the month of June, we had 5 assault batteries reported to us, 1 domestic violence, and 1 sexual assault case. We only had 1, but the one case we did make an arrest on the domestic violence. The sexual assault case, the victim declined prosecution, and in this case, is a rather unique case. This instance, there's a lot of memory gaps as to what transpired and when things transpired. We also have some video evidence to kind of dispute what potentially happened. So we still hold it as a sexual assault until we can rule out everything. But in this particular case, there's some issues with the case and determining whether it actually occurred or not. But we still have some things we have to look into there. We had 1 malicious destruction of personal property, 10 larcenies, 3 motor vehicle thefts, 11 motor vehicle break-ins, and 2 burglaries. And I believe the burglaries were to construction sites, if memory serves me correctly. So we had some of our larger construction sites, the containers on the site were broken into, tools and gear and stuff were stolen out of it. In one of the stolen vehicle cases, we made an arrest, and warrants were signed in 6 of that occurred in June. So 7 of the cases we have either made an arrest or have warrants out for. 9% of the motor vehicle break-ins were involved forced entry, so 1 out of the 11 where they used force to get in, the other 10 were unlocked or open or window down or something like that. Traffic report for June, we had 7 hit-and-run crashes, 13 driving while under suspension, and 4 DUI arrests made. You see the tickets issued there, 63 were for speeding. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but the speeding part, I just want to emphasize, we all saw the crash involving the mail carrier yesterday, and I can definitely say speed was a primary factor of what caused that crash. And it was there on 123. And sometimes, when I talk to residents, they wonder why my officers are on 76 and 123 enforcing traffic laws. This is why. The woman that was driving the mail carrier vehicle is very lucky to be alive right now. So that is why we're out there, because we're trying to keep people from getting seriously hurt or dying. So that we could do a better job in getting in the neighborhoods and getting to know our neighbors and that kind of stuff. But we're taking away from one activity to do another activity. So people are getting hurt here. So we really need to emphasize that. And I know that I'll be meeting with my officers. We usually do a little kickoff meeting before school starts, and traffic enforcement is one of the primary things that we are basically not going to acquiesce on. We're going to do it professionally, but we're going to take a zero tolerance stance on egregious driving. So let's see. We had 5 minors in possession charges made, and then 9 possession of drugs or paraphernalia charges. I will say, if you did not know, in Pickens County alone, there have been several deaths attributed to fentanyl, and this meth and fentanyl is the primary drugs that we are seeing. A lot of what we're seeing, it's people traversing through Clemson, where we make these arrests, although we do have some outlying areas where we have some users inside the city of Clemson that we're coming across and making these cases. The minor in possession, I've instructed my staff, starting this school year, we're going to take a closer look at where the minor in possession offenses are occurring, what establishments, what areas of town. And the reason for this is we're starting to see a huge rise again. But one of the things that we're seeing, and it's maybe this is a potential presentation in the future, is these folks can send, get online and get a fake ID from overseas that looks almost identical to their driver's license. And the only thing that's different is their date of birth. And it's virtually, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's very difficult for the staff at these establishments to know that it's a fake ID. So we have to come up with an innovative way of combating this, because they just pay $60 and get a fake ID, and then you go into any bar or buy alcohol wherever they want to go. And this is important too, because we unfortunately see people who die from excessive alcohol consumption, and we want to protect folks from doing that. So hopefully we'll have that information for you and present it to you here in the near future. Any questions?
Righty, go. Citywide speed limits for local road discussion.
Yes, ma'am. So I sent all of you an email. This is a discussion that's come up a couple of times at different venues in the city. And I also linked some articles to the discussion. And I have in front of you, I have copied the different laws, state laws that cover not only how the speed limits are determined, but also the authority that the municipality has in determining what the speed should be on the municipal roads and not the state roads that are inside the city of Clemson. The articles that I sent you, and the reason why I sent them to you is because in some of the discussions, there were some city officials that suggested that we drop the speed limit down to 20 miles per hour, and that's the 20 is Plenty campaign that is going out there across the country, and they're basing it off of data, crash data, that kind of stuff, and also they compare it to, I think the UK is where they compare it, but I find it kind of funny because one of the articles I read, they said it was 20 miles per hour in the UK. Well, if you know anything about the UK, they don't use miles per hour. It's kilometers per hour. It's a little, not the same speed for, conversion purposes. But anyway, I digress. One thing I wanted to point out is if you look on page 2, I highlighted in the state law that basically establishes what a speed limit would be on a road. And specifically when we're talking about this would apply to a residential road. So if a residential road in an urban area, as this is pointing out here, does not have a speed limit sign on it, it defaults to 30 miles per hour. Well, all of us here live in different neighborhoods, and most of us in residential neighborhoods, and I am going to go out on a limb and say all of you would probably agree that 30 miles per hour is too fast for a residential neighborhood. So without any kind of city ordinance in place for the city of Clemson that would establish what that maximum speed limit would be in any residential neighborhood, absent a speed limit sign that may make it lower, this is what our discussion is about today. Should we make a recommendation to the council to establish a minimum speed limit for any municipal road that is in a residential area or a high-density area such as the urban district that's distinguished here in statute? And if so, what should that recommendation be? And there's a lot of different places where this comes into play. And one of the neighborhoods, the most recent neighborhood that was brought to my attention that had no speed limit signs is Patrick Square. Patrick Square has no speed limit signs right now. So right now, legally, 30 miles per hour is the speed limit through Patrick Square. I can tell you right now, the neighbors in Patrick Square are not of the opinion that should be the speed in their neighborhood. The city is now working with the developer, and they will be putting speed limit signs out there. But if we come up with one that gives that guidance, that gives a threshold. Now, that does not mean that if we set this, that if the council decides, or city engineering or somebody decides that a particular road needs to go higher than 25, that they can't take the steps to do that, but there are certain things that have to occur before it arbitrarily goes up. The same thing I would say is if it needs to go down slower than 25, they would have to go through the same process. So for an example, you hear me talk about the speed studies that we've been doing when we get speed complaints in particular neighborhoods. So the speed study is one of the things the industry looks at as at least one thing that needs to occur before you start looking at lowering the speed limit, putting other kind of speed control devices in the neighborhood, a design change, etc. I consult with the city engineer, who's Chris Shiver, and we then come up with a game plan of how we're going to address the issue in a particular neighborhood. Speaking of Chris, he was going to come to the meeting and speak to you about his position on this. Unfortunately, something came up family-wise, so you have included in your packet a memo that he wrote to you about his opinion on the topic. In short, he's in agreement with it. And so that's my kind of introduction. I'll open it up to members of what you would like to do or discuss and how we move forward.
It wouldn't include Berkeley Drive, would it?
No, so again,
Or Esquina Trail, or
no.
Pendleton Road?
This is why I put it out. If you look on page 2, where I have highlighted, it specifically talks about how the local authority in section D that's highlighted basically does not have the authority to alter the speed limit under section 1530, which if you go back down, it's talking about state roads. So Berkeley is a state road. Issaquena is a state road. Pendleton is a state road. Rock Creek is a state road. So there are several roads that go through Clemson that are state roads. The local jurisdiction does not have the authority to change the speed limit on there. Now, that doesn't mean the speed limit can't change. The city can approach state DOT and say, this is too fast on this road. We need to do something about it. And an example of not necessarily changing the speed limit, but an example of this is on Rock Creek, where if you come off Pendleton Road, Rock Creek is the road that goes from Pendleton Road and winds its way through the neighborhood and eventually comes out on Berkeley, I believe, or at least one of the side roads. That's a state road that goes through there. When you come off of Pendleton and you go past the telephone equipment and power yards, you start to come into the neighborhood, it starts to hook to the right and continue on, or you can go straight onto Cedar Lane. Well, at that intersection, there is a stop sign. I know if you're coming back towards Pendleton Road, but there's no stop sign if you're going the opposite direction, and whether you're going to make that left or go straight. Well, what happens is Rock Creek is 35 miles per hour. Cedar Lane is 25 miles per hour. But when people come off of that road, a lot of people take Cedar Lane to get back to Clarendon and go that direction and take them back towards Berkeley. A lot of people don't slow down. They continue on that 35 mile an hour speed going through that. And if you go down that way, that road narrows significantly before you have to make the right and then the left to go down Clarendon. So we did a speed study there. We put our speed devices up there. We got the average speed and we presented it to the state and said there's an issue here that we need to resolve. And the state has a plan, from what I understand, to put some more traffic control devices at that intersection to kind of help slow that down and be a little safer. They've told us that they're going to do this, but I haven't seen it happen yet. So whenever they get there to do that, and hopefully in that situation, we're preventing something from happening before it happens. Unfortunately, sometimes it's too late. I mean, this may be a bad example, but the 3 deaths that occurred in Cherokee County on I-85 in that shoot, now they're going to change the traffic when they probably knew ahead of time that wasn't probably the best thing to do. I'm guessing that.
It was dangerous without the shoes.
I've traveled it several times and I was uncomfortable going through it. So anyway, so hopefully we'll try to address some of these things ahead of time before it's an issue. And that's just one example. So that any state road that comes through, any U.S. highway we would have to engage with state DOT to change the speed limit. But any road like Riggs, Edgewood, the section of College Avenue that's past Edgewood all the way to 93, which the city owns, we have the authority to set those speed limits.
I have no problem with 25 miles an hour in the residential area. I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Now, with that said, and Chris didn't put it in his memo, there are roads in certain sections that are currently marked at 15 and are warranted to be 15. So any road that has speed bumps on it needs to be 15, because if it's any higher than that, you go over that speed bump and you're in somebody's yard. And there are some roads by design, because of how narrow they are and how close you have to get to a car coming the opposite direction, would warrant a lower speed limit than 25. But I think starting at 25 rather than 30 is a little more, in my opinion, logical, and it helps us. And there's ways that we can, put signs up around town to basically say the speed limit on side roads or residential roads is 25. So if you go down a road and you don't see a sign that says 15, you shouldn't be going over 25. And if the signs get pulled up or get knocked down or whatever, if those other signs give proper notice, and that there's a statute here on the page 1 that says you just have to have basically notice for the drivers to know that's how fast they're going to go.
So that would be coming into the city or something in the city?
Inside the city, or in the when you turn off the main road into the neighborhood, saying 25 neighborhood wide unless otherwise posted.
Well, I was just going to say, I move that we propose the city council set the citywide speed limit to 25 miles per hour for streets owned and managed by the city of Clemson. That they propose an ordinance.
Is that a second?
Second.
So proposed and second, I guess. Any further discussion?
I'm good.
All right, let's take since we're making a referral to the commission, let's take a formal vote. So all in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? All right, it's unanimous. So I will draft something up, put on the agenda, and I'll let you know when it's on the agenda for city council if any of you would like to address council about your thoughts on that. Okay, well, thank you very much for that.
Alrighty, that was painless. National Night Out discussion. I guess, Lisa, I saw an email that you had some.
Right, so the National Night Out was originally planned for walkthroughs, different neighborhoods, and it was my understanding from speaking with different members of different communities that might not be the best approach, that it might be better to have an activity or an event or something that sort of engages the community more than, just kind of showing up in the neighborhood, maybe knocking on doors and things. People might not be as receptive to that, and I think Chief has another plan in mind for that evening.
Well, before I go into that, Eunice, did you want to say something? Okay, so one thing when I first planned to do the walkthroughs, it's my fault. I'm the one that came up with it. First, we didn't have enough time to plan an event. So I was trying to think of another way that I could get into the neighborhoods, talk with the neighbors about the neighborhood, give me a little historical perspective, point out things in the neighborhood that need addressing, so on. So I took a page out of my former chief's book where he used to go do the walks through the neighborhoods, and I don't know why. Well, I know why. He's been with the department for over 35 years, and a lot of people know him, and a lot of people in those neighborhoods know him. So that was probably why it was acceptable for him. And nobody here in Clemson, in the neighborhoods that I'm talking about, know me or know me well enough, and I can understand apprehension. So by no means was I trying to make anyone feel uncomfortable. I was just trying to find a way of getting into the neighborhood and having that interaction. The other thing I didn't know, and I learned as I was doing the planning, is the 3rd of August is the first day of the Pickens County schools. So if I did have an event, I would be competing with everybody trying to get home and get to bed for school the next day. So I think what we're planning to do now is there are a couple of apartment complexes that we've done stuff with before, Creekwood being one, and at least two others. And we've done things at their complexes in the past for National Night Out. So my community coordinator, community resource coordinator, Sergeant Kelly, is working on figuring out what we're going to do. And the apartment complexes are a little bit of a tailspin because they're coming out of COVID also, and they haven't had anything for over a year, so they're trying to get back into the swing of things and doing that. Especially the complexes that get government assistance because they get credit for hosting events like that. So we're going to coordinate with them. If there's anyone else out there that would like to do something on that day, I'm all ears, welcome to do that. But I think what we might do, and I spoke with someone earlier this week, a point that was made when Chief Bowling over in Seneca was named chief. The town had basically a meet and greet with the new chief, and they did it in downtown Seneca. And I know we're all familiar with how Seneca is set up. Hopefully, if you're not, you know, it's they have the ability to close off some streets down there and have an event. So as you know, a lot of other people came forward and said, well, it's too hot to do it in August. Well, the closer we get to fall, because of football, we start running into a lot of hurdles there. And unless we do something on a away game weekend, we're competing with football. The problem with away game weekends is everybody else is waiting for away game weekends to have their events, so then you have competing events. I'm always looking for ways of getting out and meeting with folks. So I know I took some recommendations when some of the neighborhood homeowners associations have their annual meetings or whatever, getting out and just showing up there. I just need to know when they are and where they are, and I'll show up. I'll be there. So any other recommendations there? Next year, as long as we don't have any, I don't even want to say it. As long as things keep progressing as they are right now, next year we will plan a larger event. But I want to have events as we go through the year to get people out there. Because some of the feedback that I heard, and I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about speed enforcement, is our residents see our officers on the main roads enforcing speed on 93 and all that, and they don't see them coming through the neighborhood and saying hello and getting to know people. And so we're gonna do our best to change that as much as we can.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely admirable that you want to meet the residents and the neighbors, and I would just suggest for next year, National Night Out is a national date, not chosen by two campus, chosen by some other organization, but maybe we could put it on our agenda to advise him with anything we might know, and if you let us know in advance, I can talk to my contacts in the neighborhoods that you're interested in and see what their advice would be. So obviously we couldn't do that because we didn't know it'd be in August, but you know, maybe we need to have sort of a running agenda every whatever, February, March, we talk about the National Night Out and advice. Every whatever, April, we start talking about football. I don't know what it is, but perhaps, so we can give you some advice.
Yeah, the timing is kind of bad.
Right.
Because you mentioned when we were talking about this event that maybe giveaways would be good, you know, pencils on back to school night, for which there has to be budget, which means you have to talk about it in advance, how much budget, right? And that's not something you can do in a week's time. So those are all great points.
And the event that we plan to is, you know, it's a community-wide event. It shouldn't be focused in any particular neighborhood or not. It should be a larger event.
Well, you know, talking about particular neighborhoods, I like Little John. You know, I just think that's a great, like where they had the Juneteenth and all that. I just thought that was a great spot. I mean, people, I feel like the police need to connect more with are in those neighborhoods to build that trust factor. So I think Little John is a great area.
And when we do this, and they see this at the national level too, there are neighborhood dynamics where some neighborhoods don't necessarily get along with other neighborhoods, so then they have more than one event on the same day. And I think that's, Little John is great, and I am setting an office up there where I'll be at Little John, where people can come meet with me there. But there are some folks that don't feel the same way about Little John, and I need to engage with those people as well, and that's part of the reason why I was picking different areas to walk through, so that way that dynamic didn't affect me having contact with them.
When the people in the church were murdered down in Charleston, I can remember when that happened, and I just got up on a Sunday morning. Instead of going to my church, I went in Abel, and I just sat at the back of of course it was obvious, I was the only white person there, but they knew, and that, of course they know me from law enforcement experience, but what that brought out is, because I was from Fort Hill Presbyterian, that what it created was Fort Hill Presbyterian church members were invited to Abel, and then we did the same to them. We said, come to our church. And then, if we could involve the churches and things like that, it would be good too.
I agree, and I need to reach out to the pastors at all the different churches as well. I've started to do talks at different civic groups to get to know folks. I started with the Rotaries, the 2 Rotaries in town, and I'm looking for others to get out and meet folks and start having that dialogue.
It's just like I had an event with me running my nonprofit, Clemson Paw Partners, and of course it's right in the center, but anybody can come. And we had one black couple to come, and I thought, okay, they're from here, which thrilled me to death, but no, they were from Easley. So that's something like, everybody's welcome. It's just, I think we just got to get the word out, and they need to feel like they are welcome and that we'll help everything too. So that's why I was kind of targeting those areas.
Well, and that's one of the complications with visiting churches, as you all know. Every church here has members that live in Seneca and Anderson and Easley, right, and they drive here. So, and Rotary too, right? Any club you go to is maybe a third Clemson residence, right? And we're glad he's spending his time there. But to get truly into only Clemson resident, what other than neighborhood associations have that? So that's a thing for us to think about. What other organizations except neighborhood associations might have 2/3 or more Clemson residents? And there aren't so many. Certainly Little John is not such a place, right? That's 2/3 not Clemson, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I continue to take any input you have, and we'll put on the agenda in the future for the next National Night Out, or even a community type event, maybe in the spring or something when it's not as hot and we're not competing with football, and put some kind of event, and that might be the thing. And I, now that I think back, even when we did this in Florida, it was always a challenge for when school was getting ready to start and all of that. And in Gainesville too, we deal with football and those weekends. And it seems like, well, when this started, it happened up in the Chicago Northeast areas. Well, they don't go back to school till after Labor Day, so.
And it's not hot.
And some of them are starting in July. What schools start in July? There's some schools starting in July.
Yeah, it's coming. Well, maybe one time to do something is the weekend before the time change, when it's still dark in the spring, and then do a movie night, right? So you're not starting the movie at 9:30, right?
Right.
It should be then.
Yeah, here with the current, when the sun goes down, you'd be starting the movie at almost 10.
What if we could have if they, have a street event, so where everybody could come, have something like that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it some more. I'll accept ideas and we'll throw some ideas out.
So we can't do it next week.
At Clemson Paws, we will have.
Since we do have a lot of empty seats, we could consider taking communities and issuing a particular invitation for the meeting, even if you put them on the agenda for a short, brief time, and then they would feel like that was an individual invite. We have 12 meetings a year.
Well,
You
that,
saying bring them in here?
Or get all brought back to
Well,
Joe's.
community, individual
Right there by
communities
Joe's.
that are targeted to.
Sure.
if you want to do that, you give me the neighborhoods you want to invite, and we'll send letters out and put them on the agenda.
That would get your retired folks, right? I'm sorry, but when my kids were 3 and 5, there's no way you'd have gotten me here at 6 o'clock at night. No chance in. Right, so it would only draw in people like us that have spare time at 6 o'clock, right?
Especially after school starts. Because then all the sports start. When they're out of school, they're taking them to practice or games.
And keep in mind, we're using up the chief's time, right? So it's not a bad idea, but let's use his time well to meet people and not. Yeah.
Well, and that's the chief too. I mean, I'm a proponent of our patrol officers out there patrolling the streets, not meeting people and making friends. That's not what they're there for. They're there to be ready when it hits the fan and they react. You know, if they're in somebody's garage shooting a bull with them, community policing, and something happens, that's time. And they're minutes behind when seconds matter, so.
It is, but I think we just have to be efficient on how we do it. So we're prepared when we're needed, but then we're also creating relationships so when something does happen, people are talking to us and giving us information and not just shutting us out. And they only will do that if they have a pretty good feeling of they know who that person is. Their trust isn't going to be betrayed.
I think overall, city of Clemson residents trust the police. I don't think there's a lack of trust.
I do, but I want to get in those pockets where they don't. And let's work on that a little bit.
Well, and I mean, it's just a reality anytime you have a new staff. I mean, I've gotten to know you and I trust you, but I can't tell you how many people said, well, I had Chief so-and-so's cell phone in my phone for 20 years, right? That's a little different relationship, getting back to the hate crimes, right? The types of communities. So if you're white, you don't know about hate crimes, but if you're a trans, gay, black woman, you can think of hate crimes that happen here, right? And you don't trust the police, and those are the people. So that's the thing we have to be aware of, is that the chief has the right idea being new, and he knows he's new, and he's seen as new, and he wants to meet people. I think that's wonderful, and we would just want to say we'd like to help you and give you advice. So give us some more time to think about it.
That sounds great.
Okie dokie. Y'all ready to go to the next one? Y'all got anything y'all want to discuss?
That's nice.
We could talk one-on-one. I saw your email about signage for pedestrian.
Yes.
So we could talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
I have some ideas. For the rest of you, Dr. King brought up his advocacy for pedestrians crossing the road in the crosswalks, but either signage not being there or not having enough time to cross the road. Am I capturing that correctly?
Actually, it was for signage on the post near the light, like it's located on some university red lights, traffic lights, that say yield to pedestrians on turn. Because like the big intersection at College Avenue and 123, when the green light from 133 College Avenue, that's when pedestrians also are given the walk sign. And you have traffic turning right in the right lane, traffic turning left in the opposing way. And so I think if you alert the driver that pedestrians are going to be crossing, then we can eliminate a lot of near collisions.
And it's the 133, 123 intersection primarily.
There's some other, but particularly that intersection.
I see what he's saying, you know, somebody will have a walk across, but then you'll have somebody with the sign that says turn right or something.
No,
you
I
know.
mean, you just turn, even,
Yeah.
well, you have the green light and you're not going straight across the intersection, you're gonna turn right.
Yeah.
Civic or so forth, and so, I mean,
It's if you have any ounce of sense crossing there, you better have a whole lot of sense crossing there and be aware, because not everybody's gonna pay attention. And even though that driver would be
Especially
inspired,
those turning, because
Yeah.
it's not in their mind that there's gonna be a pedestrian crossing.
not me.
But the red light near the SO Club has the exact signage needed that says, yield to pedestrians on the
I think I was on College Avenue the other day, and you know how they have the crosswalk and it says pedestrian has the right of way. We all know this. We all drive. We understand that. But there was a family that was crossing the road, and there's 20 of them. And there was the grandpa, the mom, that you could see the whole family, and they were excited about a new student coming here. It was so cool to watch. But I stopped, and the other lady stopped, and they crossed illegally, going from one store to the other. And I didn't have an issue with it because I knew what was going on, but I think we probably need to look at something about maybe some more signage that says, remember, the pedestrian has the right of way, not just in this crosswalk. I don't know if we can table something like that or not, but it just seems to me that
Technically, the pedestrian that is not crossing at a crosswalk does not have the right of way.
right.
And if they get hit, they could be cited at fault. So this came up, if you come into Clemson in the morning around 7 to 7:30 from the Oconee side or on 123, you will see Clemson I employees crossing 123 from south to north because they're parking on the other side of 123 and going to the office. And we put the speed sign right there at Subway to slow people down coming across the bridge because people, even though it's dropping to 45 and 40, they're still going through there at 55. So when we put the sign up there, we got a good response. It slowed a lot of people down. So we had to move the sign and put it somewhere else. And I see the speed starting to creep back up again. Needless to say, that is a long stretch because they're going across 4 lanes, almost 5 lanes of traffic to get across. And the nearest crosswalk is the traffic light at Cross Point Church for that. So legally, they can cross the road. They just don't have the right of way because they're not in the crosswalk. If they cross at the crosswalk and they're going across, they get hit, and the other person's at fault because the pedestrian has the right of way to the crosswalk. So I understand where it's come from. I think we need to make, especially downtown, and I have to check with Andy because they're starting to have meetings now on the Clemson downtown revitalization plan. And hopefully the crosswalks that we have down there, maybe we can mark them better, make them more noticeable. Maybe put, if you've gone to Florida, and I'm saying Florida because I know they're down there, if you go on Gulf Boulevard, along the beach, and off of Clearwater, or any of those places, wherever there's crosswalks, they have yellow lights that will blink where you push the button and starts blinking. They can step into the crosswalk. They have the right of way. The traffic has to stop. I think that would be relevant in some of the areas that we're talking about here, so that the drivers see, okay, somebody's in the crosswalk. They have the blinking yellow light. They need to stop.
We have that on Pendleton Road.
On Pendleton Road,
Push a button at the Botanical Gardens and it flashes, and it's a crosswalk.
on Pendleton.
Pendleton, perimeter.
Perimeter. Okay, so on campus.
Perimeter.
Yes, on campus. So, yes.
Do we have any jaywalking laws here? I mean,
So
nobody
the law-
likes jaywalking
so the
laws,
law that
but
allows, yes. So the law that I was talking about where they can't cross, the reason why they can cross is because there's no crosswalk within a certain distance and there's no intersection within a certain distance. So the law allows for them to cross there. But if they are close to a crosswalk or whatever and they're not utilizing it, then they can be cited for jaywalking. So it depends on the...
hard to enforce in a college town.
Right.
People are,
Right. And most of the smaller roads, so College Avenue between 93 and say Keith, there are 2 or 3 crosswalks there, and there's crosswalks at the intersections in between. If they cross north of North Clemson, 93 in that area there, they could be cited
close enough to crosswalks that they could have gone down and crossed. But the crosswalks are not very well marked.
That was my
Because even those, as you say, downtown, with the large vehicles now, the big trucks and SUVs, I mean, many times, you know, you can't tell if there's a pedestrian there until they step out in the street.
Yeah, the delivery trucks are challenged, especially when they park on the sidewalks or near the intersections. It's hard for the drivers to even see the crosswalk signs, so.
Motion to table this and adjourn.
I have one question. I brought up last meeting, because we keep bringing up all this traffic stuff and short of making this a traffic complaint line. Are we moving forward with maybe a website people can go to rather than bringing it to this forum every single fourth Thursday or an email address or something that we can?
Our IT director is working on it. It's on his list of things to do. And then my Civic app, I think, is.
Yeah, the
where
Civic
we're-
app, you can put in traffic things.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm not making it.
No, I know, but I'm saying that could be a
for the
way people
public,
could be
so
directed.
this doesn't turn into a whole traffic forum.
They could be directed to this.
That's my Civic app, I used that, and an issue that had been several years, I've been trying, it was a washout with a dangerous road and cyclists running off, and I submitted that to my Civic app, and within 24 hours, it came out and fixed the problem.
I move to adjourn.
You don't get to move, you're the president, you're not allowed.
first.